Whether your business is small, medium, large or extra large, there's a retirement solution for every type of business. oldmutualsuperfund.co.za.
Now, earlier today, I spoke with the Gauteng Premier, Nomvula Mokonyane, and got her reaction from the budget vote speech. Let's take a look at what she had to say.
We've been vindicated by census on the issues that we have raised, an additional 1.2 million people, and also the movement on a day-to-day basis. We welcome the budget that the Minister is presenting today. What is of importance in that is that there are more resources that are coming to Gauteng and that are responding to where the pressures are, not just on salary, but on efficiencies, effectiveness, and service delivery in health, in education, and most importantly, on economic infrastructure. The last thing that is also quite important with the minister's budget, it's the capacity, just mobilizing the capacity of the state to deliver, so that then we do not always rely on outsourcing the skills that are needed. And I think for us as a province, this is but one of the things that we're going to be tapping on. The increase that is coming to our province is real new money that responds to what Gauteng has always been saying. That also goes towards what I have spoken about, a city region and the future and different roles and responsibilities of provinces. One size fits all. The minister has responded that it's not the way to go. And this budget.
Of course, that's the Premier for Gauteng, Nomvula Mokonyane. To catch the rest of that interview, do watch Political Exchange on Friday night, where you can hear the Premier's plans for what she's going to do with Gauteng's economic hubs. Now, let's get back to our discussion and our panelists. Eusebius, before the break, I was saying I'm going to give you a chance to get in on the debate that is, I suppose, at the heart of economic policy making in South Africa here, the extent to which you take care of the indigent, but also develop and encourage growth where companies and private sector investors can come to the party.
Absolutely, and Nick was saying there in Cape Town, Karima, that you have certain policy tensions that we are about to have to stare in the face. I don't think so. I actually think that there is conceptual clarity here. There are two, from an intellectual point of view, false distinctions that we must recognize are false. Number one, the idea that you've got to choose between either a sustained high level of economic growth oriented budget with low welfare, or a big welfare state with zero chances of high levels of growth. That's absolute false. The other false dichotomy conceptually is this idea that we must either choose between lifting the unemployed out of unemployment and into work, or reducing income inequality in the workplace between those people who are already employed. And that's the kind of DA message where they want the labor movement to feel guilty for wanting better work conditions, with the false idea that the necessary trade-off you must make is that you will continue to have high unemployment if you reduce income inequality. Where I would agree with Nick, which I think is a much more sensible critique, if I may say so, is rather to ask the question, is the money that is rightly allocated properly spent? Because as Stephen Friedman and other analysts often tells us, we treat the poor like subjects, we treat the indigent like subjects, and we don't always spend the money in such a way that we activate the agency of people who are currently on welfare. That's a better critique of the money being spent, rather than having a moral panic about the allocation.
Now, Nick, of course, Pravin Gordhan has been very emphatic about building capacity in the state, rooting out corruption. In fact, he introduced a series of measures to actually look at that. And of course, we know that a special procurement person is going to be appointed soon to oversee and hopefully to stem the kind of corruption that we've seen, particularly taking place, in the provinces. But do you have faith in the ability of the state, Nick, to actually spend the allocations properly where it needs to go, on time and on budget?
Karima, just a warning, my sound's been turned really far down, so I just caught you and Eusebius. But do I have faith in the government's ability to spend money more effectively? Because ultimately, a lot of the way Pravin Gordhan balanced the books was to say getting better value for money. Yes, we're not going to have a lot more money, but the money we do have and the money we're able to spend, we're going to get more out of. And a lot of the details about curbing corruption and making accountability, and it feeds very much into what Sisulu and Patel ministers have been saying about the public service and other elements. Do I have faith in government's ability? Look, I mean, I think as a normal South African, my instinctive default setting is to be distrustful and disappointed that government has for so long let inefficiencies, corruption, etc. Dominate many of the spending programs, and obviously the leakage is huge. Do I think that it's improving? I actually do. I think in a whole range of ways, government is on top, has a real understanding. And this comes from the technocrats, I mean the left technocrats with COSATU backgrounds and SSCP backgrounds that are in this cabinet, that I think understand technically where the problems lie and technically ways in which it can be controlled. So yeah, I do have some faith, much more than I've had in a long time.
Rudy, let me bring you in here. Faith matched with actions is of course what we require. COSATU has been very outspoken on the issue of corruption. The Labour Federation formed Corruption Watch. It calls on government to act decisively against wrongdoers. Jeff Radebe was saying name and shame. Is naming and shaming enough? Shouldn't people be going to jail?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask COSATU their views on this. I don't speak on behalf of COSATU.
Well, I'm asking that lady.
Pick off of the institute. We've not done really work. But I think it's I mean, there are a lot of different processes that you would have to deal with. I mean, I think one of the key points that we need to do, that we need to look at is, the kind of institutional arrangements that are there. The Corruption Watch is part of that kind of contribution from civil society. Try and stem that. I mean, I think the issues around pointing up a national procurement office and setting up that office is going to be critical. Name and shame. Before the name and shame, of course, the decision not to allow public servants to participate in government tendering are also critical contributions. So these are all, I think, important steps in the right direction to ensure that we curb the kind of, corruption that is out there and abuse of the kind of systems that is there. So I think it's critical and it's important. So name and shame, yes, I think it's probably part of that kind of, it's important that, let's identify white-collar crime, and if there are particular individuals that are part of that kind of system of corruption and, patronage, and I think it's critical that we identify them.
Eusebius, let me focus on the middle class. You're a big champion of the middle class, and you often argue that they shouldn't be unduly burdened by the problems of government or by the indigent. They seem to be carrying the can here. Fuel levies, carbon tax emissions. If you want to buy books on the internet, you're going to be paying more. Is it fair to be giving the middle class this kind of burden?
I actually don't think it is entirely fair insofar as, high taxation would be easy to accept if you're part of the middle class, if you know that you don't have to opt out of state services. So it's a difficult question, Karima. I think from a political morality point of view, absolutely the middle class must disproportionately shoulder the burden. So let me be frank about that. And the reason is very simple, that a lot of the social capital that the middle class convert into high levels of income has been unearned. If you are a white kid born into a suburb, that's not something that you've chosen. And so there's something morally noxious to imagine that you shouldn't be taxed. So I don't mind the middle class being taxed. Where I think things do become generally unfair as such is if the middle class, unlike say in the Scandinavian countries, can't be guaranteed that the high levels of taxation will result in public services that they can benefit from, because then it becomes a double whammy. You pay for services that are suboptimally delivered by the state, and you still get messed around in the private sector with more exorbitant services there. That is where the burden becomes socially unacceptable.
Nick, let me bring you in here. The middle class, are they carrying the can here, and should they?
See, I'm digging around for things to disagree with Eusebius about, but I've been unable to. And look, I suppose, except let me go with this, I think it's not a hugely significant issue. I don't think the middle class is carrying too much burden. This idea that we've got 5 million taxpayers and which is always, that's a code word for white South Africans paying the tax bill. I just, I don't buy it completely. I mean, where we are historically, where we come from, the social solidarity that is required, ultimately it's also a way of purchasing stability and purchasing a future. I think it's not unreasonable to that those who are carrying the burden, it's not unreasonable that they are carrying the burden. And there are other forms of taxation that are built into the system that touch everybody. Here's another thing we can fight about. Yeah. I'm a big champion of e-tolling in Gauteng, so there's something else we could fight about.
Well,
so I think it's one of the ways user pays fees in social infrastructure and infrastructure. I think there are lots of people paying taxes. Obviously, you should weight the wealthy higher. The middle class, I can't make the call really about whether they are paying unreasonable dues. I, as personally, in my life, get irritated that I pay taxes, but send my children to the German school or others, but I send the other one to Westerford. So, you know, I mean, I get a bit of both. I drive on the roads. So I'm not sure that the middle class are in as dire and straits as all of that.
Well, gentlemen, unfortunately we've run out of time. That's it for today. Thank you, of course, to our guest, Nick Borain, political analyst at BNP Paribas Cadis Securities, Rudy Dix, Executive Director of the Labour think tank Naledi, as well as Eusebius McKaiser, a political and social analyst at the Wits Centre for Ethics.